as long as the individual is not otherwise prohibited from possession of a firearm. This wording is very curious to me because it's never really spelled out. Yes, it is. ATF.gov firearms, identity prohibited person. No, you would never type that in to find it. I found it. Found it a long time ago. But one of the things that isn't listed is an age restriction. Let's go over this really quickly. I'm not going to involve the NFA and everything else in a bunch of ranting. Let's talk about it simple. The creation, manufacture, or making, those words are important, of a firearm. What are the restrictions, if any, in the United States with our history and a history of people making guns who are self-described or trained or authorized, but not always, gunsmiths, companies making guns. The history of people making what they needed, not making it standard, making it extremely standard. And do you make it to where it's prohibitively expensive? I did a video recently on, well, essentially, can you legally make your own pistol that shoots gelled mace? I didn't say it that way. That's what the video's about. And the answer is yes, but don't do it. It's dumb and you can get it cheap. Just like making a firearm, unless it's a specific type, 12 gauge, is always more expensive than buying one. 12 gauge. But under U.S. federal law, is there an age limit on making, keeping, and bearing arms or not? Here we go. Creation or manufacturing, implying for purpose of sale, you're making it to make money. We don't make art, we make money because music companies don't make music. They are there to make money. The music producer doesn't normally make music. Oh, wait a minute, some of them do. But anyway, for the purpose of sale or distribution, it's actually and distribution. For the purpose of distribution, meaning you could be giving them away in mass and or for selling them. They have the wording wrong and it was corrected later, but this is the original quote. It requires that you get a federal license for being a manufacturer, in quotes, and a unique serial number and other identifying characteristics, such as the name of your company or you individually as a gunsmith or gun maker, and or the location, to make it extremely distinctive. It could just be a string of characters, like a GPS line and a time and date stamp that's done century, year, month, day, hour, minute, second, like I prefer. And you do have to identify who made it. But that's only if you're going to do it for, and I'm going to put the wording correctly, distribution. If you're making hundreds of these to hand out to a dissident group and you're French and it's Hitler coming in, do you have to put serial numbers on it? Any firearm not detectable by metal detectors or x-ray machines is either regulated heavily or banned depending. Just like machine guns or any weapon that fires explosives or it's overtly a destructive device. They're all regulated or banned, but they don't have to be banned. Funny thing is you can have things that are completely banned but not regulated. Having them, literally having them, isn't illegal. Making them is, and the other way around sometimes. It is illegal in the United States for a large company to make a machine gun and distribute it in mass as a manufacturer. It is not illegal for me to make a machine gun, I'm not shitting you, as an individual if I simply ask the ATF for permission, may I make a machine gun? I have no record and I'm being overt about it. I'm not hiding it. And if they ask me why, and I'll tell them dead ass the reason. I'm testing thousands of rounds of ammunition for quality control. I need a machine gun because I'm not going to sit there and fire it. Yes, I can build a mechanism that I have my finger here and the gun wobbles back and forth and it's bump firing. It's not a bump stock, so it would be legal, and I could do that. But even that gets annoying. I need to be able to make a machine gun that I can feed 1,000 rounds in to test them to see if it jams once. If it doesn't jam once, we've got the powder rating correct. I actually worked at a place at one time, a long time ago, doing that. It was a small factory, but they had to spend the $200, it was only $200, tax stamp to build a machine gun. What they did is they built a machine that would fire after you hit a button. All it did was take a conventional weapon on purpose, so it would burn it out. It was testing the barrels too. And just pull the trigger. It used a real simple little motor. If I sat there and hand cranked it, which I had to do for a week, I cost money. The batteries don't cost as much. $200 tax stamp. It's not illegal. But it's illegal for Winchester to put out hundreds of them. They can make it totally convertible if you use an electric motor on it. Hand drill. But you have to get the $200 tax stamp yourself. Creating a weapon that's a semi-automatic long gun, shotgun or rifle, doesn't say anything about handguns, from 10 or more imported parts is regulated and banned. Why? Importation ban. So what did the ATF do to abuse this? Oh, how many cotter pins and screws and springs are in the entire weapon? How many connecting parts that are considered unimportant pieces of shit? 20. Are any of them from China? Ever? Yes. Prison. Oh, wait a minute. That's for semi-automatic ones. If I'm making brake actions or pump actions, it doesn't apply. Oddly enough, and this is funny, semi-automatic doesn't include machine gun. If I make a machine gun entirely out of parts from another country, they can't regulate it as much. But they'll do it if they can. If I include semi-auto mode. But if it's fully auto, meaning you can't fire one shot at a time, if you pull the trigger, it just empties the magazine, that's legal. Or if it's 3-shot. Triple shots are also considered machine guns. Creation of firearms is legal without a permit or markings or notification to any entity if you make it for non-commercial purposes. That doesn't mean you can't resell it later. You can't make it originally for the purpose of selling it. Making hundreds of them and handing them out also falls under distribution. But, and this is important, handing them out to a bunch of dissidents to defend the United States isn't considered a commercial act. You're not making money off of it. The ATF may make that rule now, but if we're being attacked, the rules aren't going to be enforced as loosely. They'll be strict. If you want to make them, don't sell them. That's our only restriction. And if you do, we'll give you a $200 tax stamp later or whatever it is for SOT. I'm not kidding about that. As long as the individual is not otherwise prohibited from firearm possession. Are you restricted from buying a gun, but you can possess it? Are you restricted from owning it, but you can physically hold it and operate it by firing it? This implies operating a gun. It's not just possession. Possession implies usage. Are you legally permitted to fire a gun? Yes, I'm being very specific. If you're in a state, county, or in a country that says you can't buy a gun, I said country, or owning it, but you can have somebody else's gun they owned and they purchased, and you can fire it because you have permission from them, you're not prohibited. You could be prohibited in every other way. That's what that rule actually reads as. Let's read the other conditions, besides the age I'm going to bring up in a minute. Sorry for the delay, but let's list them. Have you been convicted of domestic violence of any kind, and or are currently under a court order with or without conviction, or a restraining order or notice of protection concerning said act, or any act similar of any form of interpersonal violence or accusation of intimidation? If someone has a restraining order against you on a federal level, you are not permitted to have a gun. A state or county can give you rights to do it. And yes, you're going to have people who invoke federal law because they don't like state law, and vice versa, which doesn't work in court. You have to start off with a presumption it's federal only, state only, or combined, and you're not allowed to argue that. Go ahead and type below how I'm wrong. If you are a dishonorably discharged military person, it's presumed you shouldn't have a gun. U.S. citizenship, if you renounce it, you're not permitted to have U.S. citizenship granted rights to a gun, obviously. If you're an illegal alien, same thing. Also, if you're a legal alien, depending on, sometimes, yeah, you're also restricted as well. If you're considered incompetent, mentally defective, or having diminished capacity, or if you have never had it because you're, let's say, under 13 and are legally forbidden from having the rights of, having achieved majority, you don't know the difference between right and wrong, or have ever been in a mental institution. Now, that last one seems reasonable, except when I say, if you've ever been in a mental institution for any reason, well, for suicide, right? No, it means that they didn't like anybody who had ever been in a mental institution, no matter how mentally fit they are now, to ever have a gun. They were very restrictive in the past. If you think current rules about red flag laws are extreme, realize that that mental institution listing was put in a long time ago. You had to not have anything wrong with you at all. No marks on record to be allowed to have a gun on a federal level. A user of a controlled substance. In the state of California, you would then try to invoke state law so you don't have to deal with federal law because it's ganja. Suddenly you're not in favor of your Second Amendment rights being Constitution only. A fugitive from or a convict of a crime punishable by 1 year of imprisonment, even if you didn't get the 1 year. Felon. Those are all the things, and there's probably more, that are considered otherwise prohibited from possessing a firearm. These rules don't say you can't buy a gun, you just can't keep it. Not that you can't own a gun, you can't touch it. Yes, there are felons that are legally permitted to have a huge gun collection because they run a gun shop. Because they got a legal restriction removed for that. Or they run a shooting range. They're just not allowed to fire a gun. They can have them on site. They can even own them legally because it's owned under an LLC. But they're not allowed to ever touch the gun or fire it. Possession implies that you're going to fire the thing. So, yeah, so the purpose a lot of people think these laws have are horse shit that don't exist. But the one thing that isn't listed in here under otherwise prohibited from firearm possession is age. Yeah. It goes along with the competency rules, but it's not in there. It's implied. Federal laws for minimum age purchasing of firearms exist. There are no federal minimum age for long guns like rifles and shotguns, ownership, and sometimes possession, and sometimes purchasing, depending. But for the most part, if it's a long gun, there's no real restrictions, which means if you're under age 18 and above 13, you're allowed in some areas, states, counties, whatever, to make a gun, if it's that type, or not. Depends. I'm going to bring up the Trump rule here, and it's not what you think. 30 states make it technically legal for a child to possess a long gun. 20 states and D.C. have set their own minimum age laws for possession or ownership or purchase. They're all different ages. You can purchase it in 1 year, you can own it in another year, but all of them have a ruling concerning whether or not these are restricted or more or less based on being with or without consent of a person who is your guardian, a parent, an adoptive parent. Child Protective Services are legally permitted to give a 14-year-old kid in a couple of states the right to keep and bear arms or even make one and purchase it and give them an authorization to go buy a damn gun. The local police department or the forest ranger can deputize you or legally permit you to carry a rifle, pistol, or shotgun. Most of the federal laws only are on pistols. They're virtually non-existent for long guns. Once you get that permission, you're no longer otherwise prohibited and can make one. It's implied that you should be able to make one, quote-unquote, because you might have to repair one. These are rules that were created in the early 20th century, 1920s. Oh, making a gun? I said make. That includes changing the barrel out, depending on the county you're in. Just changing the barrel or just fixing a spring is considered remaking or making a firearm. You had to have a permit. And this is the funny thing. In the state of Oregon, county of Multnomah, city of Portland, where I have to have a concealed carry permit to open carry, someone under 18 can get a permit from the state to ignore that law and concealed carry a goddamn pistol. Because they're a security guard or they work at 7-Eleven. I met one kid who was 17 who legally had the right to keep and bear arms, a concealed weapons permit. He had a .50 Magnum. He could take the recoil. The laws are not written the way you think they are, and if you're allowed to possess and or own and or buy a gun, depending on where you are, you're also allowed to make one. But the rules are very fluid, and you'd have to get a lawyer to figure this out. But I thought I'd just throw this monkey wrench into your belief that it was only felons that were restricted. And yeah, some areas say if you're over a certain age, you have to qualify at a shooting range. But only if you're military. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.